Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
Financial Survival Network is presented to you by Regal Assets. Buy and sell physical gold and silver through your existing retirement plan, 100% tax-free with Regal Assets. If you want to include physical gold or silver in your existing IRA or old 401k, request your free investment kit, which was recently featured in the Forbes and Smart Money Wall Street Journal magazines. Call toll-free 855-678-6620, 855-678-6620, or visit regalassets.com. One of my favorite bloggers got back on the show, Greg Hunter, usawatchdog.com. He's amazing. He has vast experience in the mainstream media, as well as branching off on his own several years ago to give us the real story, to let us know what's really happening in the world. And I can't recommend his postings enough. Hey, Greg, welcome back to financialsurvivalnetwork.com.
Terry, good to be here.
And we are so happy you could make it. We've both been having technical issues all day. It must be something to do with the constellations. I don't know. But man, there is just so much happening in the world. And yet, if you read a mainstream media publication, you know, you would think there's a couple of celebrities that are in trouble and posing with scantily clad or barely covering bikinis, but not much else happening in the world. Do you ever get that feeling?
Do I ever get that feeling? Yeah, I get that feeling all the time. Today they're talking in the USA Today. I used to work for Gannett, incidentally, and they, in the days I worked for them, they paid me in the lower markets to, you know, go out and get people. I mean, I did stories about peeling Ford paint, and I was the first to break the kid killing airbags, and that it wasn't just airbags killing kids. It was airbags in some cars killing kids. And in Hondas, they weren't. And in, General Motors cars of that era, they should have been the most, right? They weren't. They had a pretty good airbag, generally speaking. And some of the other makers, like, for example, the Chrysler minivan of its era, they fixed all that since. All those airbag problems are fixed.
Right.
They had more kids. They had the most, numerically, the most. I thought, well, how can the minivan have more than all of General Motors? I think it was all of General Motors, this one, the Chrysler minivan, the Dodge Chrysler. They fixed that now. I want to make that perfectly clear. But in its day, in the early 90s, when I called up NHTSA, I never will forget it. I said, well, then General Motors should have the most, right? No. Well, the mainstream media reported this as, well, it was kids, just kids in front of airbags. Nobody, that wasn't the case. That unfairly reported for the people who did it right, Honda. It unfairly penalized them, lumped them into everybody else. And now we don't even have that. We don't have any of that report.
Yeah, well, look at the Volt. The Chevy Volt was blowing up because you got these lithium-ion batteries, which pack as much energy as a few sticks of dynamite, and they get hit exactly the right way, and they're in these bags, and the things start on fire. And because it's government motors, that was in the news for about 2 or 3 days, and it's gone. And then the other thing, Greg, that gets me, like I can't even begin to tell you, is when there is a story, there is never follow-up. Like, some stories are important enough that you want to go back and figure out what really happened. Like, I'll give you a for instance. Dixon, Illinois, they had this controller, and she was there for 30 years and stole over $53 million. Now, I've been following this story. I filed a Freedom of Information request with the town council, but they've started putting all their reports finally up on the internet, and I've looked through it, and as it turned out, the only thing I could find where she could have stolen was the Capital Funds Project Fund, and nobody has reported back on this. You think that's an important story?
Well, it's a very important story, and, things like Sherrif Joe Arpao, he comes out and finally says, hey, listen, the birth certificate is a phony. It's a phony, a fraudulent certificate, basically, on a government website. And, you would think that the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal would, if this guy's a kook, they would do a story and say, oh, no, we hired our own forensic people. It's all online. It's very cheap to do. It's an online story. There's no Freedom of Information Act request, nothing. And
Yeah.
poof, it's just like, well, he's doing it because, I mean, what they say is that he's doing it because,
Political.
the Justice Department is looking into racial profiling in Arizona, and that's why he's. And this is a new story. This is a
Hey.
law enforcement agency, and one of the most renowned sheriffs in the country saying what's on a government
Former
website
FBI
for the
agent.
president.
Former
His
FBI.
president
Yeah, he's
is
former
a
FBI.
phony.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, I don't like get into politics much, but I used to be in the printing business in a past life. Sold out that company a while ago, and I wasn't really knowledgeable. I couldn't be an expert witness in it. But you and I go back long enough. We remember typewriters.
Yeah,
And right, you
I
remember a
have one.
typewriter, and it had keys. And once one of the keys got broken, meaning the letter got broken, it got a slash in it, it never came back. That was it. It typed that way in perpetuity. And yet, on this birth certificate, there's different type sizes, different fonts or type styles. We called them typefaces then. And there are broken letters and unbroken letters. So if you had a broken S or a broken A, which were most common, every time it printed an S or an A, the letter was broken. And yet, unbroken and broken. That is impossible from one typewriter. And that should be the tip-off. But nobody seems to care about what real news is anymore.
But here's my point. My point is, listen, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, all these people have investigative departments. If this guy's a kook, and I don't know whether he is or not, but if he is, then this should be easy to hold his head under the water and embarrass him, because if he's saying this about the president and it is untrue, that is awful. And my question is this. Listen, if you think that he's doing this because he's politically, payback, then why don't you just do an investigation and nail him to the cross?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's what I want to know. Why? I mean, I'm a small operation. I don't know whether he's telling the truth or not. I suspect he is, but if he is not, then all these news agencies should. I mean, they follow around Mitt Romney and a trail of what he made 15 years ago or whatever. I'm not a fan of the Republicans or Democrats either way, but if you have time to do that, don't you have time to look into what this sheriff is saying and embarrass him if he's false, if he's bringing false witness against the president of the United States? Then you should kick his tail, literally.
And he should be tossed. The guy should be tossed. All right?
Yes.
He has no business being a sheriff. But instead, what do, Greg? They marginalize him, minimize him, and ignore him. And that's the treatment.
What is up with that? I mean, this is a guy who has ever in the past said, wow, Ronald Reagan, and listen, if Ronald Reagan, if somebody made the charge against him, and I don't want to get into the Democrat and Republican, if somebody made the charge against Bill Clinton, oh man, they would have come down on them heel and spur. They would embarrass them to where they couldn't be dog catcher. My question is, why aren't they doing it? I don't know whether he's got a fake birth certificate or not. I'm not an investigator. My question is, why isn't the mainstream media doing this?
Because they're no longer media. They don't report.
Yes, isn't that sad?
They're so uncurious. They just take everything that they get from the administration as the truth with no vetting of anything. And that's the death of the mainstream media that we're talking about, because, hey, it might have helped get Obama elected, but now we're past that, and they've lost all credibility, and people are wondering, who are these people? Whose side are they on? They're not helping you. They don't care about if you lost your job, if your company was shut down because of a government policy and you lost your job. They don't care about you. All they care about are these mythical ratings and, putting the show in the can and going on to the next thing. And it's just disgraceful, and it's a loss of mission. Their mission was to keep the government honest. And
yes,
now,
no matter who's in power. And I don't care. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican, period. A lot of people think, well, I'm a Republican because I'm down on the Obama administration. No, I'm just down on any administration.
Oh,
if there's a Republican in the White House, people would be calling me a flaming liberal because
Same here.
I'm just after the. Listen, if I started my website after Bush 43 got out of office, I would have questioned the same amount of questions with Bush 43 as I did with Obama. But Obama is in terms of the financial sector. I mean, this is what the third straight year of $1.3 trillion cash deficit. Even the USA Today did some reporting. Of course, they're 4 or 5 months behind John Williams, saying
accidental reporting.
the real gap accounting of our deficit, including everything, commitments to Medicaid, Medicare, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, everything is $5 trillion a year.
Hey,
not just 1.3 trillion. That's about what it's going to come out, somewhere in that neighborhood. And so, this fiscal cliff. I mean, people like Peter Schiff talk about fiscal cliff. Forget that. I mean, we're talking about the real fiscal cliff is going to be the rise and spike in interest rates, and that's what the game is all about.
And
holding
inflation
down interest rates by hook or crook, however they can do it. Print lots of money, buy bonds. And I ask people this about the housing, so-called recovery, which incidentally they just had the latest Case-Shiller report, and on my site I took the same press release that ABC and CBS and NBC and Wall Street Journal had, and their headlines were truthful, but the rest of the story would make you think, wow, we're at a bottom. No, we're not.
No.
Year-over-year declines of about 1%, a little more than 1, a little less than we still have year-over-year declines and 3.5% 30-year money. The housing market should be taking off like a rocket, but it's not. So what are they really doing? They're holding interest rates down by whatever means they can. And what happens when rates, I ask people this, and they just look at me like this.
Oh, can I tell you
what
what'll happen?
Rates go back up to 6 or 7%.
Their historic norm. That's the historic norm. 5 to 6% is the historic mean. And I can tell you exactly what is going to happen without even thinking about it. You will see another 30 to 40% hit on housing. And if Wall Street in the Northeast stops laying its golden eggs, New York, except for marginal areas, has only seen a 10 to 20% reduction in prices, unlike the rest of the country.
They got most of the bailout money.
Oh, of course. Hey, I'm not making any excuses for why. I don't think it's got to do with market fundamentals. It's got to do with the TARP money and the bailout money and that 16 trillion that's printed and just sent out one way and, keep it afloat. And all they're doing is keeping the banking system up. They're not helping you. They don't care about you if you're underwater. All they care about is keeping these too big to fails up, and semi-functioning as zombies.
They're protecting those mortgage-backed securities, and they have a ton of them. I mean, Kerry, the problem is so bad, and this is what the mainstream media will not address. They changed the accounting rules in 2009. Now, not just for the banks, but all of them. But the banks were the biggest, beneficiary of changing the accounting rules, which allows them to value these mortgage-backed securities and real estate on their books at whatever they think they can get for them in the future. Now, who can do that? That's like me having this pen, and I say, hey, in the future, I think this pen would be worth $100,000 in the year 2045. It'll be an antique. Well, my bottom line looks pretty good. I don't have to make much money right? And so they paid bonuses. They had all this stuff. And aren't you hearing, and I'm going to turn this around back on you because we talk to a lot of people. Aren't you getting this vibration with the people you're talking about? I mean, about financial collapse, some sort of coming calamity, something coming up. And I don't mean the norm. I mean, I had somebody on my YouTube channel say, oh, you just want a crash so bad you can taste it. No,
God,
that's what the math is.
Who would ever want that? Who would ever want that? That is, we could be talking about Mad Max when that happens if everything falls apart all at once. But yeah, people are concerned. Yeah, of course. There's a large portion of the population, especially in the area where I live, they just don't, most of the population will not accept the possibility that the collapse is coming and that they need to prepare, that you need to buy gold and silver, that you need to stock some necessary items in case there's supply disruptions. We're only 15 meals away from 15 days away from starvation in any given place if you haven't prepared. So, Yeah, I mean, people are in complete denial over it. I was in Vegas at Freedom Fest a couple weeks back, and everybody's there just like they're partying like it's 1999, except that it's 2012 and the world has changed and they're not prepared or willing to accept it.
I was talking to my sister-in-law, sweet woman, and even in
Mm.
their church, they're talking about 2012 and about, end of days. And I told her, I said, you know what? I don't know about end of days and whether or not, a solar flare is going to knock us out or the whole earth's going to change. Or I don't know anything about that. But I will tell you that on the math, the economy is terrible. 700 trillion is what the BIS says, a little more than 700 trillion in derivatives. I mean, they grew by 100 trillion last year. And the real number, people say that's
It's
understated by at least
over.
half.
Yeah, it's way over that
That's
because
way
they
over that.
adjusted.
This is a deflationary unwind, and they're trying to, throw money into it as it wants to keep it from unwinding. And then
Mhm.
you're going to get in. This is Crazyville. This has never happened in human history. There's never been this much debt
No,
issued on the planet. There
never.
probably hasn't been this much debt issued on the planet from the beginning of time up until
Yeah,
2000.
yeah,
It's I'm sure it's hundreds of trillions of dollars in derivatives, unbacked, unregulated, and that's what's frightening in terms of the financial system. And then you have, no way for Biederman was telling me, Charles Biederman, no way for that you can't. There's not enough tax collection. There's
yeah,
not going to be enough tax collection to pay for the
never.
government programs. This is bad on the
Yeah,
math of it. So on the math of it, I just say, I don't want a crash to happen. I want just the opposite. But if we are going to have a crash, and I am a journalist as are you, shouldn't you warn people? You may want to pad your hand without being, oh, the sky is falling. That's why I try to link to everything. I try to, like my real estate story I did. I used the same press release they did. I got a completely different story. I mean,
yeah, because you're
it's a
not
press
agenda
release.
driven.
I could back it up with a press release. Read it for yourself.
You're
But
not
yet the
agenda
mainstream
driven.
media spun this idea that, the second straight month of growth. Who looks at their house? Oh, I made more money this month. Year over year is the way you look at that, and it's declining. Anyway,
Absolutely.
it's sad. I guess what I'm saying is that people are in the dark. I'll bet you if you ask 100 people, you might get one that says, "Oh yeah, there's something wrong with the economy. It's pretty dire."
If you're lucky, Greg, if you're lucky, I mean, there were 2,500 of us at Freedom Fest, and we're kind of like 2,500 people that get it. Different people think it's going to take different amounts of time, 2-3 years. Some think we have
I
10
think it's a
years,
process.
but everybody gets that we're heading in the wrong direction, and there's no turning back. And yet, everybody around us, they're coming there for the weekend. They're living just for the day, and like you said, the information is there. They're just ignoring it. They're not reading your website. They're not reading mine. They're not reading Biederman's website. They need to be going to these places and learning about it. And I figure, hey, if we pick off some people here and there, we've done our job. Eventually, they'll tell their friends, and more people will get attuned to it because everybody knows, Greg, everybody knows people who can't find jobs, who are barely subsisting. They're living on the EBT cards. Everybody knows them. And for those people, for that 25% of the population, things are getting worse or they're already intolerable. And we just got to hope that there's not another 25% that joins them.
Wasn't there a report out that said that 100,000 people were below the poverty line? Now, our poverty line is different than the poverty line in Pakistan or in India.
Part 2 is available to subscribers of FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com. Go there now, sign up, and enjoy.